In the aftermath of the U.S. election, I quoted uber-leftist Michael Moore, who stated, in quotes, "Everyone must stop saying they are stunned and shocked. What you mean to say that you were in a bubble and weren't paying attention to your fellow Americans and their despair. Years of being neglected by both parties, the anger, the need for revenge against the system grew." Bernie Sanders agreed. He said Donald Trump tapped into an anger of a declining middle class that is sick and tired of establishment economics, establishment politics, and the establishment media. Well, I agree with that assessment, but I suspect that's about as close as they're going to get to knowing what to do about it. And I got to add that I was talking about that kind of elitism in Washington that ignored 95 million permanently unemployed, the massive unemployment and displaced blue-collar workers well before this election. But agreement on the manifestation of the problem is as far as I go. I have absolutely no confidence that those on the left, like Michael Moore, and I give him credit, he didn't abandon the unemployed and those living in despair, but he doesn't understand the causes, or he certainly doesn't give any indication he does. The first thing to understand is that there are no easy fixes. It's not to be government rides to the rescue. Even if government put in the most effective policies, then competently carried them out, a pipe dream, obviously, it's still not going to change things quickly. Instead, what people like Moore want to do is double down on government regulation and taxation because they see capitalism as the culprit. I mean, you have to laugh at the signs on display in many of the recent anti-Trump protests that read, and I quote, "Wall Street is the enemy, not Muslims or immigrants." Really? Wall Street can't stand Donald Trump. Your girl, Hillary Clinton, was their candidate. Who do you think were Hillary Clinton's biggest backers, who gave her literally millions of dollars to speak in return for who knows what? Her list of donors, with the exception of the reported big money from Saudi Arabia, read like a who's who of Wall Street. This is the candidate of Wall Street, and still the anti-Wall Street protesters didn't quite get that because they're clueless. Excuse me. What it also revealed, though, is that this was just the latest version of the anti-capitalist crowd. Moore, Sanders, and the protests are missing that story. The problems in the U.S. aren't because of capitalism. It's cronyism and the incompetence of government. You don't get a $4 billion plus lobbying business in Washington because it's a free capitalist system. There are 175,554 regulations in the Code of Federal, in that book, the Code of Federal Regulations. And that's just one layer of government, and it doesn't even include the federal laws and statutes. You got to get to the state and then the municipal governments. This is a government-dominated system that, because of that, begets influence peddling and corruption. I mean, the surest road to getting ahead is to get politically connected. It doesn't matter if you're an individual or a business. As the anonymous politician behind the book, Congressman X, stated in quotes, "Most of my colleagues are dishonest career politicians who revel in the power and special interest money that's lavished upon them," end of quote. A company called Strategis created an index to track the stock performance of the 50 companies who spent the most lobbying government. And that index outperformed the rest of the market by 30% in the next 12 months. You know, when Ford and Chrysler got $13.7 billion in Canada taxpayer funds, $80 billion in the States, that isn't capitalism. That's the direct result of political connections. I mean, it's the same goes for any other industry subsidy or political bailout or business bailout. That's about political connections, nothing to do with capitalism. And that's not the only area it manifests so. I mean, think about this. The average federal public sector worker in the U.S. makes 80% more in compensation than the average American. Washington, D.C. has more top 1% earners than any other jurisdiction in the country. But against all the evidence, even basic common sense, people like Michael Moore, Bernie Sanders, the anti-Trump protesters, the old Occupy movement crowd call this capitalism. And ironically, they're calling for more of the same, more government intervention, more regulation, more influence peddling. They think that's the problem. Not enough regulation. Wow. They're not impacted whatsoever by the historical record of failure of that model. I mean, my goodness, Bernie Sanders and Michael Moore, Noam Chomsky, Linda McQuaig actually support the disastrous socialist model in Venezuela. Well, some of the media are waking up to the fact that they were completely out of touch with the plight of tens of millions of Americans. I haven't read or heard a single insightful commentary as to the causes of the problem. It's much deeper, and it guarantees there's going to be more problems to come. As I mentioned last week, the massive failure of public education in the inner schools in the U.S. plays a huge role. I mean, we're in a digital-based economy, but you never hear them talking about the combination. Now, there is some talk, but actually no government policies on the impact on jobs, especially in manufacturing, of technological substitution. This gets at the heart of the unemployment that was a major part of this election. I mean, Mr. Obama watched his U.S. firms relocated out of the country due to the tax reasons. They have an uncompetitive corporate tax regime in the States. And the only way you get around that is through lobbying and political connections. And by the way, if you're not sure of that, come on, go back and review why Burger King's head office moved once they bought Tim Hortons. They moved from U.S. to Canada. This whole thing isn't a failure of capitalism. For a generation, the U.S. has been in the throes of an ever-increasing regulation, taxation, cronyism, size of government, government incompetence. The dissatisfaction and disconnection of half the population, the resulting election of Donald Trump, is just one manifestation of the consequences. There are more to come.